So today, we're going to dig into a California ballot measure that honestly has huge national implications. It's called Proposition 50, and it really gets down to a fundamental question. What do you do when the very way we draw our political maps seems to undermine the whole idea of fair representation? Let's get into it. We really have to start with this question because it gets right to the heart of voter trust. I mean, when you cast your ballot, you expect the outcome to actually reflect what the people want, right? But what happens when the system itself feels tilted? When the math of the votes just doesn't seem to add up to the math of who gets power?
So, what's this number? Well, it represents a huge distortion in our democracy. An analysis from the Brennan Center for Justice found that partisan gerrymandering alone has created a pretty solid advantage of 16 to 17 seats for one party in the U.S. Congress. Now, this isn't just some small rounding error. We're talking about a systemic imbalance.
And here's the crucial point. This is not an accident. It's a calculated strategy. In states where one party gets to control the map drawing process, they can literally draw district lines to lock in their own power, sometimes for an entire decade. And that creates this massive national distortion where Congress doesn't fully represent the votes of the American people. Okay, this right here shows you the disconnect perfectly. On the left, you've got a state where voters are split right down the middle, 50-50. But look at the right. Because of how the district lines are drawn, one party can end up with a huge supermajority of the seats. The will of the people gets twisted, not in the voting booth, but by the pen that draws the map. So, what can we do about it? Well, that's the big problem. The folks at Common Cause took this issue all the way to the Supreme Court, but the court basically said it wasn't going to step in and set a national standard. And federal laws that would have banned this stuff, they failed to pass in Congress. So we're kind of stuck in this critical impasse. And that inaction at the federal level brings us right back to California and Proposition 50. With no national fix coming anytime soon, states that are actually committed to fairness have a really tough choice to make. As Professor Rick Hasen from UCLA Law puts it, do they just sit back while other states go on a new round of partisan gerrymandering? Well, Proposition 50 is a direct answer to that exact question. What Proposition 50 does is authorize a very specific tool, mid-decade redistricting. Now, this is not something that happens all the time. It's a temporary change to California's congressional maps, and it's designed as a really targeted response to what's happening in other states. It allows California to adjust its own maps to help counteract that national imbalance. And here, Professor Hasen makes the connection crystal clear. This measure was put on the ballot because of what other states were doing. So it's not framed as some sort of aggressive move, but really as a defensive countermeasure, a way to try and rebalance a national map that's being actively pulled out of shape. Okay, this is the main worry you hear from opponents, and it's a totally fair question. Is this just California getting into the same game? Does it undermine the state's own independent redistricting commission that voters worked so hard to create? Well, the folks behind Proposition 50 argue that no, it doesn't, because of how it's uniquely built. And this gets us to the absolute core of the argument for Prop 50. This is not a blank check for partisan revenge. Instead, the power that Prop 50 grants would be governed by a really strict set of principles and clear limits. The whole point is to make sure it's used as a tool for fairness, not just another partisan power grab. And these limits are actually based on fairness criteria from the nonpartisan group Common Cause. So any new map has to be a proportional response. It can't be an overreach. It has to have public input. It has to protect the voting power of communities of color. And it even requires our leaders to endorse long-term federal reforms. It's all designed to be a responsible, principled action. And this is absolutely crucial to understand. This is not a permanent change. As you can see on this timeline, any maps drawn under Prop 50 are temporary. They're only in effect for 3 election cycles. After the 2030 census, the power to draw maps automatically goes right back to California's independent commission. It preserves the will of the voters in the long run. So, as we wrap up here, let's zoom back out for a second. The argument for Proposition 50 is that this isn't just about California. It's about whether we, as a country, are going to let our national system of representation become deeply unbalanced by what a few states are doing, without any kind of counter-response. This quote from Common Cause, wow, it really captures the stakes perfectly. They're arguing that when one side is bending the rules to lock in power, just standing by and doing nothing isn't a neutral choice. It's basically allowing the undermining of fair representation to happen without a challenge. So ultimately, the case for Proposition 50 is that it's a necessary, temporary, and principled action.
It's a vote to push back against a growing distortion in our democracy and to restore some national balance. And it's all guided by strict fairness criteria and an automatic expiration date that respects what California's voters have already decided they want.